Hello, and welcome to another episode of Life is a Piano. Today, I'm going to be chatting with Adam Parada. You might know him as an area educator, as well as the keyboard player for groups like Melophobix. If you enjoyed today's conversation, you can support this podcast and others like it by going to patreon.com/Dutcher Snedeker. There, you can contribute at different tier levels to get access to early releases of each podcast in audio and video format, as well as the ability to hire my services as an instructor, consultant, and recording artist. You can also head to DutcherSnedeker.com to support all of the other ventures that I'm a part of. You can see all of my releases with different artists. You can read different album reviews that I've done, and you can have a one-stop spot for all of the platforms and social things that I'm doing and producing around the internet. So thanks again, and feel free to share this with someone who enjoys discussions between keyboardists like this one. All right, let's get into today's episode with Adam Parada.
Why that? Go with it.
Yeah, I'll just record a little disclaimer and be like, oops, ignore all of my excitement because it messed up.
That's good.
But yeah, how's I don't know, your life been in the last crazy few months?
It's been pretty good. Well, thanks first of all for having me on the pod. I've seen all the other stuff that you've been doing, and that's really cool. So thanks for having me on. As far as my life has been, it's been pretty good. It's gotten quite a bit better since I'd say the fall, winterish time. And I last year I just want to forget about. This year is already starting off quite a bit better. I was just teaching in Byron Center, and so I just came straight from that. I have lessons throughout the week, and that's pretty consistent, and it has been that way for a couple of months now, so I can't really complain.
Yeah.
And as far as gigging goes, I mean, we have stuff in the works. I don't know what's going to happen and what's not, but it seems like there's like small things that are starting to fall into place for, June and July, and some private stuff that carried over from last year and some out of state stuff, which I guess is kind of maybe the way to go, at least right now. I don't know how this is for you and what your attitude has been towards trying to find shows, but what's it been like for you?
Yeah, it's, there's some things that kind of fell on my plate, like the whole listening room residency that was not
Yeah.
pre-planned at all. It was kind of like when things opened back up, the listening room was like, oh, we're going to convert into a dining space, and that way we can, have people in the room, at the whatever legal capacity it was, and we want to have like some Valentine's weekend music. And then after that weekend, it was like a week to week type thing of like, oh, well, let's try a second weekend, see if, people come out. If it's not a holiday, all right, let's try another weekend, see if it's like a trend. And then in March, we started doing trios. So I was alternating different trios each weekend, and that's continued this month, and it might go into May. It's still up in the air of like what they want to do. So there's been that kind of thing where it's like, oh, that's cool. or like GR Noir, like they were able to open up.
Yeah.
And I played their opening week, and I just went back there this past Wednesday.
Nice.
So there's been those kind of like, oh, cool, like I could do some gigs.
Yeah, it seems like the trio thing is probably the way to go, like right now, right? Like this is the easiest way to play in a small space and to get this small group of people together, and like everybody, so I'm sure it's easier for you, but just to have like that tight little group, and then be like, oh, we can play this room that only seats 25 or 30 people, but we're still making it work, and they want to have that music for that. I haven't been to the GR Noir yet, but I hear good things.
Yeah, they've been very, very accommodating, and people seem to enjoy it. Every time I've been in there, people have seemed to felt comfortable and enjoying just the environment and the concept a little bit with like those dispenser machines that you can like get different size pours of wines. You can get flights of wine. You can, sample a lot of variety without having to worry about like buying a full bottle.
You're right. I wouldn't even know where to begin. I'd have to have somebody hold my hand and lead me through the process and be like, well, you can try this and that. And I'd be like, okay, sounds cool.
Yeah. Well, and I guess, other than those kind of gigs that have kind of just fallen into my lap, some stuff's happening with Earth Radio. We're working with Rake Beer again to do Thursday. We're shooting for twice a month at Rake Beer, and they were really cool to us last year, opening up their space to, uh, you know, Justin's brother-in-law Dan does yoga, so he would lead a yoga thing, and we'd play some music, and then we'd do a concert after the yoga session.
Nice.
And, that'll be cool as like a more consistent thing. And then we've had, we only had one gig really carry over from last year because we didn't have a ton booked.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And so we're figuring out like kind of where we want to tag team. It's still kind of a hit or miss, like it seems like the majority of the band's comfortable to like do things, but there's still some variables in like, Madison, is he moving to Nashville this summer? Like like, can, David living in Ypsilanti, like cover the spread of gigs, like, driving that distance to try and play a gig on every week.
Well, we found ourselves kind of in a similar situation because our bassist, Matt McElliott, moved to Boston at the beginning of last year. So he bounced. And as far as timing goes, there were no shows last year anyways, so we didn't have to worry about finding a bass player. And that's still kind of on the table because we started to have these things pop up now, and we're like, man, we really put off finding a bass player. Yeah. We might need one soon. And when we recorded these two singles last year, which both got put out around like the holiday time, Stefan played bass on his track, I played bass on my track. So we could record that way, but when the show started happening, I don't know what we're gonna do. We're gonna have to figure it out. It's kind of strange, but yeah, we're gonna have to do it on the fly probably.
Yeah, and it's like, I guess the same thing you were mentioning how like the trio format is like a good spread of like sound, but also easier to book in spots. And that's kind of one thing we've been figuring out with Earth Radio is like there's the core four, I guess, is our nickname for the people that have been in the band the longest out of with the current lineup. And then David, Eli, and Wieringa were all kind of added as collaborative sounds and entities within the last few months.
I like that, entities. That's a nice way to name them.
Yeah, because they all have different skill sets, different writing styles, personalities, things they could bring to the table. And it's also with the knowledge too that's like they might not be able to make every show because they all have, like Eli and David live so far away from GR, and with Eli too, he's got an album coming out this year, and what was it? His partner in crime, I guess, Arthur, the drummer for After Hours. Yeah. He basically had to like not leave his house for a year, and now that people are getting vaccinated and he's getting vaccinated, he's able to like more comfortably go out into the world. But even that, it's still like they're back together, but they're booking. So it's like all these. At first, it was like a month and a half of like, okay, how do we figure out how to negotiate all the different little nuances of everyone's life. It makes everyone happy. And then now it's like, well, it can't happen that way. So we're just going to figure out what dates we can book, what things we can try. We just announced our new single coming out on May 7th. So we're kind of kicking off the summer with that.
Cool.
And just trying to, I don't know, have some sort of plan that's in between doing nothing and like having some entity plan everything for us, which we don't have. So
yeah, no, I feel that. I feel that. I think it's the time to be cautiously optimistic, and I think that's something that I said a lot about last year, which that didn't work out. But this time around, it's like, well, put yourself in a good position to be able to do things when things start to happen. And as long as you're somewhat working on that, as long as you've got a little sense of direction and you have a couple people who are on the same page, then you're set. And for whatever happens, if nothing happens, okay, well, then whatever. But like I said, we put out a couple singles over the holiday break. And to us, that was just a good way to prove to ourselves that, well, we're doing something right now. We didn't do the live stream shows. We didn't do a single one of those. I did like one by myself sometime last year, and which went fine. But it's hard to convince everybody the value of trying to put something out there just to stay relevant and just to say that, well, we ought to be doing something, or else we're just kind of fading. Fading away right now. And so I don't know if that's been similar with you, and if you guys have always felt like, well, we just need to jump back in and it won't be like anything.
Yeah, I guess it's been, because we put out the album last year, and we, in the fall, did a campaign with Anima Media Group. We worked with Paul Jensen out of Muskegon, who is in like Tiny Tree and sometimes does sound at Unruly. And there are these little things in between the bigger, like the release and then the campaign, that were like, okay, let's try, how do we sell merch? Let's try, the little merch drops that we were doing on Bandcamp Fridays, and trying to figure out what we wanted to put out in terms of content. We did a couple like pre-taped sets for festivals, and we did the WYCE like at Wealthy Theater series. So that was good. My thought was always like, like last year was kind of this weird. It was weird because like you could be totally justified in being like overwhelmed and unable to do anything other than survive, or seeing this as a huge opportunity to be in a giant sandbox and be like, all right, nobody's in my sandbox, so I can make whatever I want. And then, I'll start trickling out different bits of what I've made and see, how it does, or even just building on that sort of creative process. And there's been instances of that in the band with like, Justin put out a record at the end of, I think it feels like it was the end of 2019, but it wasn't. It was the end of 2020. So he had an album in the chamber, or maybe it was I don't know. Everything's a blur, but
yeah, exactly. Well, I know your guys' record, which I listened to, was excellent. That was a fantastic effort. I really think that you guys hit it out of the park. So I'm very much looking forward to what's coming up next. And I may have heard a tiny piece of the new music. I don't know. I was at Third Coast with Serena, and we were doing a short live set for the Folk Music Alliance, I want to say.
Oh, yeah. I was briefly, at the studio when you guys were like setting up, I think.
Yeah. And Kevin was working on something, and I don't want I don't want to say that I don't know if that's what it was that he was working on, but
right.
I heard a ripping organ solo. Could that possibly be it?
Yeah, I did take an organ solo. And it was funny because like we had done some takes before whatever one take made it onto the final version, and I think I was doing different ideas, and then the issue was like wanting because it seems like organ players, they're really good at like they know how to quickly on the fly, like, all right, I'm not only going to shape my lines but my tone, and I sort of know how to do that, but I wasn't thinking about it because I'm used to like, all right, this is a piano, it makes this sound, I'll just play what I know.
Definitely.
So David Ward actually like worked the stops during my solo.
I was wondering about that because first of all, hearing an organ in your ears while having to affect the tone, that's so daunting. And I know like if you grow up playing organ, you have a much better sense of how that works. But like the only time that I've ever tried playing an organ, I was like, I got to find what I like and I got to get pretty close to it because I'm not touching anything while I'm playing.
Right.
You know what I mean? I have a hard enough time doing that with electric keyboards and trying to change the tone.
Yeah.
On the fly. So that's a good idea. Just have somebody else standing there and just, pulling them for you.
Yeah. And it's, I did a session the other weekend. Yeah, I guess a little over a week ago, with Lee Heerspink, this guitarist who lives in Holland, and he basically was doing an organ trio album. It was like Organissimo minus their guitar player. It swapped their guitar player with Lee, and it was all Lee's music. So me and Caleb Elzinga were hired as like extra sounds and extra people playing melody and solos and stuff. So I was just watching Jim during those sessions, being like, all right, how does he know how to do all this? Knowing that he's the organ dude, but
yeah, the master.
Yeah, just watching him, like, wow, like at no point was there like, oh, let me just, he didn't even have to look to like flick on the Leslie or speed it up or like grab what looks like a handful of stops, but like pulls them out to get a quick sound and then pushes them back or something.
Yeah, it's really mystifying to me, and I want to tell myself that someday I'll be able to try to focus on that and try to at least find my way around it. So like even if I'm sitting down at an organ, I don't need to know how to make it look like I'm Corey Henry, but just to be able to affect it a little bit, know how to flip the speakers from like slow to fast, and then I'll call that good. I already know how to. I'm having a hard enough time trying to play other keyboards. I'm having a hard enough time trying to learn, digital keyboards and trying to do the analog thing with organs. It's wild, but you gotta love how an organ sounds, though. I mean, that's just an amazing sound that you can get out of a keyboard.
Yeah, well, and I feel like as keyboard players, like I tell this to like pianist friends that I have who, they're very explicitly like, I gig on piano, not a keyboard. I go to places that have a piano and that's what I play. And I'm not a keyboard player. But
sure.
As soon as I said, when I was studying like, classical music and playing on pianos, as soon as I said that I did keyboard or that I played a keyboard, suddenly it's like, oh, well, you should know how to, play it like a Rhodes sound, whirly, organ, clav, just like listing all like synthesizers. It's like, no, not necessarily,
right.
But
totally. Yeah. And it's like this hierarchy now of like of which keyboards you want to focus on, and you have to like be a pianist. You have to be a piano player, and that's what you do. And you are a piano player, which I respect. I totally respect that, and I understand. From the perspective of somebody who's put in their entire career getting good at piano, that's what they do.
Right.
And then like from there, where do you go? Are you an electric piano player? Are you an EP guy? Are you a Rhodes guy? Are you a Whirly guy? And I like to think that like in an ideal world, I'll be sitting somewhere right in there. I love the EPs, love the Rhodes, love the Whirly. I have a student. He's older than me. He's in his 30s, but he has his like little music room in his basement, and he's a German fellow, and he has these instruments that he's had for years and years and years. He has a Whirly and he has a Rhodes, and we will just sit and play between the two of us, and we'll switch off, and he'll come from one to the other, and then he has another keyboard in the corner. And it's just a fun little playground where I don't usually get to play on a physical Whirly, and I get to play around with it a little bit. So that's really cool, and I think that someday I'll get myself one, but in the meantime, I just got this digital stuff to work with. But that's kind of where I see myself and where I sit in the hierarchy.
Yeah, it's definitely like at first it was just it came out of necessity of just like, well, this is me kind of imitating organ players I've heard or imitating things I've heard on a Rhodes or a Whirly. But then I feel more comfortable, especially since Third Coast has all the, all these different physical instruments. I feel more comfortable sitting down and being like, oh, okay, this is what I can adjust. This is kind of the touch of each keyboard. This is the kind of sound I should like color something with. This is like it just trial and error, but also kind of just being thrown into situations.
Sure. Do you feel like you'll listen to some artist, you'll listen to some band, and you hear a keyboard sound? So it may be, an EP, it might be a synth or something. And then do you go, I'm going to try to find and emulate that as close as I possibly can with what I have available to me? Do you ever do that?
Yeah, I do it a lot with synths. I feel like I do it more with synthesizers, especially lead tones, because I'm always trying to find like oh, how did someone get like that kind of smooth sound but it like this character to it, or like a Jordan Rudess type keyboardist, how do they get this like overdriven, not an organ, not a guitar, but it's like somewhere in that overdriven instrument sound.
Yes.
Yeah, just like trying to figure it out. And recently though, I've thought about doing, because I've been trying to brainstorm like other videos I can make now that I have like a somewhat routine of like how to like take the thing, put it in the editing, and then publish it.
Yep.
I've been thinking of like other video ideas, and one that came to mind was like, see how close I can replicate Third Coast's studio gear with Keyscape, and just like dial tones and sounds and mechanical noises and
ooh, that's pretty cool. This is like you pick something out, and then you're gonna just say, I'm gonna try to work and see how long it takes me to be able to get to that, and then you just kind of film like the process of being like, oh, this is really close, but there's like some kind of like hammer action that I'm not quite getting here, and then try to like dial it in like that, huh?
Yeah, and I want to try. The trickiest part, I think, would be the like Keyscape does a good job of when you pick an instrument and you're playing on a semi-weighted or weighted keyboard, there's a little, there's that almost like ghost feeling of like, oh, it feels like the instrument. If I change sounds, even though it's the same bed of keys. So yeah, it'd be interesting to like, how close did I get to the sound, and then like how close did I get to the feel of each instrument?
Sure. I think that'd be interesting, particularly because you may be really successful in some instances, but there might be some where it's like pretty hard, and you had to probably like really tweak some stuff to get it to where you think like, okay, this actually does sound like how this sounds over here.
Yeah, and even like I think for referencing too is tricky. Just having like, you know, am I gonna have to do every keyboard direct to get like, you know, like, oh, I'm referencing it all through the same set of headphones versus like, you know, that sound that you can kind of replicate of like a Rhodes going through a like the cabinet speakers, but you know, virtually you'd need like you'd still need an amp or some speaker set to like get that close. There's like certain things that are hard to digitally replicate.
Well, I hope if you end up going for that, you know, it sounds like a cool idea, and you know, if you can get to work out, that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I looking forward to like just this summer, especially like trying more video things, and also like having a lot of stuff that's portable, being able to like, you know, like do a video that's recorded in like, I don't know, on a beach or in the forest, or I don't know, just have start somewhere that's not a studio and then end up elsewhere.
No, I love it. I love it. Change up the scenery, get the cool backdrops going. You know, who needs a green screen when you have, you know, Southwest Michigan to work with, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So do you mentioned teaching in Byron Center?
Yeah.
Is that like at a school, or or like a music thing, or was it just a student that lives in Byron Center? Or
Yes. So I teach privately, and I'm on the move. So I'm driving around town, and I've been doing that for 2 years. I think going on 3, and where I'm just doing the at-home lessons. I'm renting a house. I have a space that I could potentially use as a studio, but with roommates, I wouldn't want to do that, and I'm not doing that, which is okay. I don't mind driving around, and I've been able to keep a decent amount of students over the past couple of years. I mean, there are people that come and go, but my weekly schedule is pretty good. I'd say I like have about 20 students, 20 to 25 on a semi-weekly basis. And that works nicely because I have like I said, a pretty consistent schedule, usually Monday through Thursday. I try to leave the Friday open as well as the rest of the week. I started playing a church service on 28th Street called Relevant, and that I started back in the fall. So I have that on Sunday mornings, which is fine. It's worth it. It's worth it. I played other services where it's not as worth it, but this one's for sure worth it. Yeah. And yeah, that's pretty much been the deal. I worked at Southtown Guitar before I started teaching independently. So I did work at a music shop for a little bit.
Okay.
And then I decided to do it on my own.
Nice. Yeah, I see that as kind of the model. Like it used to be that you'd kind of, all your students would come from like a Meyer Music type thing, and you'd go there and that's where all your students exist. Or they were only like, I feel like a lot of the lessons I had were out of whoever was teaching me. It was out of their house. So I would just get off and do a half hour or an hour. And now it's kind of like, maybe more so because of how last year was, like, it's like, can you drive to me? Can you do over Zoom? Can you?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I definitely experienced the same thing where nobody knew what was going on last year. So I was like, well, I'm going to see what my people that I'm teaching with, their students, what they're comfortable with in terms of going to their house. A number of people went virtual, and so I had to get good at trying to do that, which ended up being okay for the most part. As long as it's not like a beginner, I think Zoom lessons work out fine. If I'm looking at the same book that they're looking at. And I'm surprised how many people were okay though with me still coming to their house. And not only that, that some people were totally pro mask and some people were very anti mask when I was coming to their house. And they know that I'm going from house to house. They know that I'm coming from somebody else's house in Sparta, and I'm going to somebody else's house in Easttown after your place. And some people were like, if you're coming to our house, I want you to wear a mask. And I'm like, I understand that. It's your place. It's your kid.
Yep.
I'll happily. And then there were some people who I asked about it, and they were like, we would prefer it if you don't. And we don't want you, dude, we don't want you to, we don't want you to wear a mask in our house. And that was strange. That was really strange, where there was nobody who felt, neutral about it. It was like, you either had to or you didn't. And I didn't really mind. I ended up getting COVID in November, and I don't believe that I passed it on to any of my students. But it shows you how real it was, and how, like, if I'm not responsible, I am just a spreader. I'm going from your kids to somebody else's kids to somebody else's kids. So that was all a little bit strange to deal with. But at this point, I've had it. I'm double vaccinated. People are starting to get vaccinated. Not all of my lessons are, which I'm not even going to go into that. But it seems like it's trending in the right way, and maybe eventually I'll be able to have my own studio. Because when I was growing up, I was going to somebody's house. It might have been some like weird dude's apartment, but at least I was going to like their place. But it's been working out well so far, so I can't complain.
Yeah, it's definitely I don't know. It's interesting that you've kept students through the last few months. Because I've definitely seen like a mixed bag of like a lot of people lost students just because they were like, well, everything's online and we're not going to pay for this extra expense because we can't afford it, or more time is invested in online school and other related stuff. And to have people who it's interesting, people who want to keep lessons but also like a very polarized approach to
polarized is a good word to use. And I respect that parents are like wanting music lessons, and I don't have just children. I have a couple of adult students as well, but that parents understand that it's important enough. And I guess they like thought that we have this time where we're going to be inside, might as well be using it to do music lessons. And I did see a little bit of that, and like I said, it's kind of normalizing now. I'm now seeing because people can start playing sports again. When the summer hits, it's like, I don't know if you took music lessons during the summertime, but when I was a kid, I didn't take music lessons during the summer. Like they gave us like a worksheet, like a kit, over like the next 3 months. So, you have like your kit, and then you could like still practice, but I didn't like have like active lessons during the summertime.
Yeah, I think I feel like the only time I might have had lessons during the summer was when I was with, and even then, not every week. It might have been when I was with Avi Reichert, this Israeli teacher who, we ended on, good terms, and we were friendly, and he definitely made me into a really great player. I just remember that those first lessons with him, and I was just like just crying because I was just like, he's just yelling and he's mad, and it's like, well, we both have to get used to each other's how we work. But he's what was it, I think he was a bronze medalist in the Van Kleinberg competition, so it's one of those like career building competitions that you can win, or not even win and like still it's going to be on your resume, and someone's going to be like, oh, he knows how to play piano really well.
Yeah
But I definitely remember with the school year ending was when lessons would take a break, because the instructor would also need a break from X amount of students every week.
Yeah. and I've started to take that to heart, because I'm like, well, I'm coming up on 2 months until the end of the school year for most people, and I don't know, I like taking off a little bit of time. I like to be able to have like a month or two at least, just to be able to travel if I want to. I was lucky enough to get out of town for a little bit. I went to Puerto Rico back in February, which was cool, and then earlier this week I went to Chicago for a couple of days, which was nice. And I think it was more just to prove to myself that I can travel right now, and things won't explode. It's like I can go somewhere and like be responsible and be around other people who are being responsible. Not like Miami, spring break type situation. You know,
chaos in a city.
yeah, that's not what I was looking for. And but I still, I was like, okay, this is cool. I'm able to go somewhere. No live music still. Didn't see any live music in Chicago. Didn't see any live music in Puerto Rico. Not a single bit.
Wow. Yeah, because Madison just got back from Nashville, and he went with a couple of our friends from Kalamazoo, and they went and saw music in certain bar venue type places, and it there was still like certain mask and policies and other stuff. It wasn't like totally open, but it felt more normal than most experiences in the last few months.
So do you think that there's going to be a draw for some musicians like Madison who are like, well, I should be in Nashville because I can play in Nashville right now. I've got there's bars and there's venues that are open and they're allowing people to come play. So why am I not there right now, as opposed to Michigan, which we're still scrounging, I guess you've got the right idea, because you've got those cool trio things that you've got set up, but I don't know.
Yeah, and I learned, because when I was in high school, I did an internship with my uncle, because all my uncles on my dad's side, one's a French horn and math professor out in at Central Washington. Another's a symphony oboist in Florida, and another's kind of everything. He's a cellist, jazz pianist, singer, recording studio operator, composer, collaborator, private instructor, and academy instructor. He does a preparatory academy as the music instructor.
Oh my goodness.
So I interned with that uncle just because I think it was something that I worked out with, like my dad reached out or something, or we both reached out when I was in high school and needed a career internship. And my uncle has always thought of, I think he used the analogy where he operates his life as kind of like a mixing board, and each channel is like, a different thing that he knows how to do or can do well or can earn an income from.
Oh, that's great. That's a great analogy.
Yeah. So that early on, I was like, oh, okay. So I can be multi-interested and have like a focal point, but then, I can't do as many gigs. Well, let's turn up some, writing, let's turn up recording, let's turn up, other stuff that'll take more precedent. And then as gigs come back, start to even things out a little bit more again. And
sure. That's interesting. First of all, is there like a time limit on this? I know how Zoom calls have a time limit. Is that a thing, or is that not
I don't. It shouldn't be a thing. I haven't had it happen yet since I upgraded.
All right, so you got the upgrade, so you should be all good.
Yeah, I always have that thought too, and then I'm like, it hasn't happened yet. So,
all right, I'm just making sure, because I've been on the call with people and they just drop out unexpectedly. So, okay, that's cool. What was I gonna say? Oh, about the multi-instrumentalist thing. So I had a friend when I was younger, Will, and the funny connection here is that his brother Joe is in Wolfpack. He's a Joe Dart of Wolfpack, right? So
he's Will Dart.
So he's Will Dart, yeah. So Will Dart, good friend of mine from high school. I went to high school with both of them, and Will would always give me shit for trying to learn more than one instrument. He would say, "I don't know why you're wasting your time trying to be a multi-instrumentalist." I mean, he played saxophone, like he was good at a couple of things too, right. But he's like, he knew I played piano. I'm trying to learn bass. He's like, I don't know why you're trying to do that. You know, like stick to what you're good at, and don't try to like learn multiple things. And I mean, you can look at so many amazing musicians who are more than multi-instrumentalists, like your uncle, right? Who could play anything that they put their hands on.
Right.
And I was sitting there like, I mean, I love piano and I play it all the time, but I really want to learn how to do some string instrument. I want to do guitar or bass and try to focus some time on that. But at the same time, I'm like, I want to get really good at something. Should I be splitting myself up? Should I be trying to divide my time so that, okay, I know how to play bass now, but think about all those lost hours that I could have used putting into piano and trying to become better at that. I'm happy with where I'm at and with the instruments that I know right now. I like knowing how to play some bass. I know how to play a little bit of guitar. I'm trying to learn accordion right now, which has been like a long time goal that I always like recently picked up within the past year. But it's always kind of been nagging me at the back of my head. Like, what do you think you're doing? Trying to learn other stuff. Just get good at what you do already, you know?
Yeah. And you know, after that internship, that was like senior year of high school. And I went and did stuff at Grand Valley, and that the multifaceted interest kind of extended because I was there as a, you know, piano performance major, and part of the curriculum was like, all right, you're going to be learning some solo rep. You're going to, you know, accompany all different kinds of instruments. They got me started on saxophones, which, you know, I feel like every saxophone player has like 20 pieces they all learn, and then they figure out what else outside of that.
Yeah.
So I was accompanying a lot of saxophones, you know, other winds and strings and things, vocalists here and there.
Yep.
But then, you know, getting involved in the new music ensemble, doing like contemporary classical stuff. That was, you know, I wasn't just needed to play piano. I might have to like jump on a, you know, homemade mallet instrument that some piece required that we had to like build, or like, you know, operate an iPad in a way that wasn't just a score reader, like using it for some sort of app or textural thing.
So it's kind of by necessity that you were learning these other things.
Yeah. And then in doing that, I kept getting more interested in like, oh, what if I, you know, did a semester in the composition studio, and oh, what if I did, you know, I was in jazz combo and like still doing stuff there. And then you know, at the time I was gigging with the Gravetones, and also with Brad Fritcher, and you know, meeting people in the scene through those groups. And when, you know, my friends who were a year ahead of me were starting to get ready to graduate, you know, I was getting questions from them like, yeah, so like, how do you get gigs? And I'm like, what? You're about to go out into the world and you haven't even tried to like be in a group or put something together, or like get like, it's like, how do you get gigs? Like, that's not what. So when I heard that, I'm like, okay, I guess I'm doing something right, because I at least know how to get work. Like,
yeah, you had a big step up on all these other people who are just like, well, he's doing something right. You know, Dutcher's like in you know, 5 different groups. You know, okay, he knows how to do it. Well, for me, it wasn't very straightforward, because I grew up in northern Michigan. I went to school in Ann Arbor, moved back to northern Michigan briefly before coming to Grand Rapids in the end of 2016, end of 2015, end of 2016, and end of 2015. Anyways, and I came to town. I was like, all right, I've got a keyboard and not much else. That's what I'm working with right now. I have no idea how to reach out. I'm not going to be the kind of guy that puts an ad on Craigslist or on Facebook and just say keyboard for hire, somebody please come jam with me. You know, it's like, you know, what do I do? How do I make this easy for myself without trying too hard? And I was lucky because I played like 2 or 3 open mics, and then I immediately fell into the group of musicians I play with now in Melophobix. And that was fortunate. It was very fortunate. Yeah. I think the timing happened to work out fairly well for that. But it could have been a very different situation, and somewhere in another place at another time that I wouldn't have been that easy. And I would have had really tried to put more reps in and prove that I, have chops and that people should want me. People should be able to have me, play with them.
Yeah. I think of like, all the different, times people have asked me like, how do you, it's like, you're a pianist, like, because I have piano friends who like, they just don't play anymore because they either, circumstances have led to them not being able to, they still haven't been able to get equipment, or they, don't have the network, or they don't have, some of them don't have a car. So it's like,
sure. Yeah.
These things that are like, not everyone has access to some of these things that, can make you more hireable and more mobile and get you more experiences. But, I always think of like, in general, just, when you're saying yes to things, or like, finding your first people to play with, or first project steps, or it's like just keeping in mind, like, I don't know, you're hireable if you can like, play an instrument, and like if you're, mess up, it's more of like like you trip, fall, like the Willy Wonka trip where he trips, but he like catches himself and like does the bow, and you're like, oh, okay, he didn't really fall.
Yeah, and that's hard for some people, right? Like they trip, and then they like can't get up. They fall down, and they're like acting like their foot's broken, and it's like, don't do that. Don't make it seem worse than it is. It's okay. Just work with it, and it's going to be okay. And I think that's a really good point, and that you have to be able to present yourself a certain way so that other people can recognize it and be like, okay, that person may not be the best piano player in the world or the best guitar player, but they sure look like they know what's going on. They sure look like, and they have the appearance of somebody who can play, and also is not making a big deal out of stuff. And I think that's like, I feel like that is prohibitive for some people. They just can't figure that out. And I'm not going to say that I'm great at that. I mean, I make mistakes all the time, and I can practice way more than I do right now. But you have to. It's a mindset thing too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for me, it was like it made me think of two things: the being, high stress environment of classical music growing up, and competing at least partially into high school. There was that pressure that kind of goes away when it's like, oh, nothing will be as scary as like learning a really difficult piece to play in front of three people who literally can decide my future and know me inside and out.
Right.
Like nothing will, like, it doesn't matter. Like playing commencement at, Van Andel, where the Grand Valley's president, read my name wrong, but it was in front of 15,000 people.
No way.
Like, do it, 15,000 people, like, it's not scary, because they're all like, most people, I appreciate people who obviously listen to music and engage with music, but when I'm doing a role, it's like, I'm accompanying a singer, like there's going to be a small chunk of those people who are like, he's a good accompanist. It's more like that vocalist. Wow. Like the way he sang that song, like I've never, so yeah. I'm used to like being put in different roles and knowing, or like, like when I did Wicked at DeVos, I subbed in for 6 shows, and that was like, cool. Yeah, super cool, high adrenaline, just because you're like, and I had like a week to basically learn the show and just do it. But then in doing that, it was like, okay, that's another, example I can point to of like, very few things are as stressful and time consuming as that, but
Mm-hmm.
the reward is also, you know, uh, it makes those moments worth it. And it reminds me of like, okay, I have been putting a lot of time into this and
Oh,
can
absolutely.
do a bunch of other stuff. Um, and the second thing I thought of was, a very short thought. Was his name Hank? Is it Hank Azaria who's on The Simpsons, the voice
Yeah.
actor?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he talked about like when he was auditioning for The Simpsons and how apparently there had been, and I kind of want to find out like who was. I don't know if it was like in the Tracy Ullman sketch days or like who this guy was, but there was a guy who was Mo before Hank.
Oh, okay.
And the only reason, Hank's asking them like, wait, there was another guy I replaced. Like, what was up with him? Like, did he not do a good voice? And he's like, no, his voice was great. Like, fit the character, and it was awesome. And he's like, okay, then why am I working? He's like, well, no one liked that guy. He was awful and mean, and everyone was glad to see him go. And
Yeah.
and
Right.
it's like, wow, like if he had just been a nice person, he would have been on, whatever season they're on now, 30 something of The Simpsons, multiple
Sure.
movies, like
Yeah.
just crazy.
That is wild. A good reminder, a good reminder to like, just in like day-to-day stuff and be like, always try to be that person that nobody can point to like something about you that would push them away. Don't be that kind of
Right.
person where they can say, well, I mean, he was good except for that one thing that he always did that was really annoying, or that there's something there. And yeah, just don't do that. And then you're gonna don't give people an excuse to not want to have you around. And I guess that's easier said than done for some people.
Yeah.
And I know trust me, I know some people close to me who I feel like kind of live that like all the time. And to me, it's like mind blowing because, you try so hard to get good at what you do. Doesn't matter what it is, but you try so hard to get good at what you do. And now all you have to do is just convince people that you're capable of doing that like all the time. But then that you can also like be a good person and be around them and show that you're pro-social and show that you can work in a group. I mean, it's like, you can be a really good player, but there's a lot. You're right. It's hard to have all of that, and especially right now because we're not even dealing with people. We're dealing with, with networking. Well, we're doing with what you're doing right now, which is like, podcasting. We're dealing with, emailing, and we're not doing the face-to-face thing as much.
Yeah, it's always, ever since I kind of like first whispered that I was like, yeah, I do some booking here, and it's like the people that appear on an email thread or in person, and they present themselves in a way that's like, it's one thing to be like, oh, I haven't really made an EPK, like what does that mean, like can you help me with that, like that's easy to fix. It's like the people who think that, an email that says, hey, this is my name and my music is ready to go, and that's the whole email, and you're like, then why haven't you didn't send me anything? This wasn't really an introduction. Like,
Yeah.
it's like giving me a reason. It's kind of the same thing, hearing from the, during the B-side sessions, like the one I did on booking, and then also just talking with Luke Sass when I was working at Founders.
Yeah.
It was like they're looking, they want to get to everything, but they're also looking for ways to just like ignore or delete or move an email aside. Like if there's not any sort of presentation of like who you are, what you do, examples of everything, some sort of condensed, one sheet that's like, here's what we do, or like, something that they can quickly just look at and be like, oh, cool, here's a video. They have a recent album, like, things that turn the conversation from like, we don't know who you are, to, all right, we've heard your stuff, let's figure out a date, or hey, we got an opener slot for this date, or like if you're just sending like, I'd like to play at your venue. And it's like, okay, but who are you? What do you
Yeah.
do? I don't care. Delete. Like,
Yeah.
I don't have the bandwidth for, that many.
True. I mean, if you have like 50 people, throwing something at you, you got to be like, well, I mean, it's like applying for a job. You just got to like vet like a couple of things, and if you just say, I want this job, I want this position. Well, tell me a little bit about it, and just and I think a lot of people get caught up because they see a venue or they see a place that they like to play, and they just are like, they can't figure out. They're like, well, we want to play here. What's wrong? Like we should be able to do this. We ought to be able to do this. And I understand playing in a 7-piece group or previously a 7-piece group that we're not going to play everywhere. I mean, that's just,
right.
There's going to be some places that are going to be better. There's going to be some people who are more likely to book a 7-piece group, and you have to kind of recognize that, but don't like try to like mask it as something other than what it is. Just be straightforward and direct and say, this is what this group is. This is what we do. And this is what we think that we're the best at. We think that we're the best at, outside, outdoor, live events, potentially festivals, like this type of deal. And then hopefully people will be like, okay, that seems like they have some good, they're good at looking at themselves and seeing what they can excel at. And I think a lot of people don't like want to focus on stuff, right? I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel like there's like a lot of people who don't want to take that plunge and say that this is what we are. Some people are kind of reject that and are like, well, we don't want to say that we're a rock group or that we're a funk group, and that we don't want to be associated with any single thing, and the fear of people like being like, oh, that's what they are. They are that,
right?
And that's their association. And I guess I'm kind of going a little too deep into it right now, but that is interesting to me. And I guess I like the idea of just being able to commit to something and going with it. And I feel like that there's a lot to be said for that. But I don't know what your take on that is.
Yeah, I agree that it's like, because if you don't define what you do, then are you one of those, like, we do a little bit of everything? Like, okay, so are you a wedding band then? Are you like just a corporate band? Are you like,
yes.
It's like, but even then it's like, are you the kind of band that we put at a boat show in the background, or do we put you at a, like a conference as like a featured entertainment that can like, reflect well on the company and, entertain clients? Like, or are you the type of person that's, it's like, oh, I do a bunch of covers. It's like, okay, so do you want the patio at this like beachside barbecue? Is that your goal? Like, because you're not playing the stadium. Like, I don't know. It's like if you don't define like what, because that's why I like playing, in different groups, is because I can I have those different sounds and placements in the chamber to be like, all right, I can't do the full 7-piece Earth Radio. What about the 4-piece? Okay, Earth Radio isn't being asked, but this jazz trio is, or this other type of group is. So
yeah, so you have like this almost ideal situation then, where you can get an opportunity, and then you can say, hold on a second, let me see which one of these plugs in the best here, and then we can see if we can make that work, as opposed to just being limited to being like the 7-piece Earth Radio, like the big group, and then being like, well, this is all we got. This is what we got to work with. So if you can take it, cool. If you can't, then oh well. And we've tried doing that like the boat show thing that you were talking about, just being in the corner. My goodness, it's weird. It's really weird. It feels weird. I don't know. There's some, and maybe, there's some situations where that's easier to play in, or there's a type of group that's a lot easier to do, but my goodness, it was weird when we tried to do it.
Yeah. And, I tend to play those types of events in like a jazz format. So it's a little bit more relaxed. So I have have fun with it, and in doing that, there will be people who like, they pass by and hang out for a second, or they like come up to the bandstand after a song and it's like, oh, I remember that song, or hey, you guys sound good, or whatever. But
Yeah,
uh,
exactly.
yeah, it's like, I don't know. I think of each gig, you know, not sometimes, more consciously than like what actually happens in the band or during the gig. But, if I play a Blue Water Kings gig, all right, what opportunity do I have either with the venue or the city or like, what does this mean? Do I dial in some new synth tones? Do I improve my setup for these weddings to make it easier to do sound checks? Like, what's the, what are the things, I don't know, trying to get the little bits of data from each gig
Yes.
and try and improve.
Totally. Yeah, that's a good bag to be able to reach out of.
Yeah. And I don't know, I like the different, the different gigs that are like, this one's more function, like the band at a boat show type thing. And then I do like the artistic stuff. Like, I've like a lot of people are, understandably, they're like, oh, Earth Radio, like, wow, like that's like such an artistic, like you must have this, like, that's totally out of bounds, like, whoa. And it's like, I've had to sell, I guess, like perform, songs that, have these like esoteric presentations of like, okay, we're all in a warehouse and I'm playing a glockenspiel and the music is written off of like different configurations of stars drawn with like star charts. And like,
Wow.
and it's, or like, I played a piece with an ensemble called 10,000 Birds, and it was John Luther Adams, this American composer who has won some Pulitzers. He wrote this piece as kind of a North American answer to what's his name? It's not Oliver. I think it's Olivier Messiaen, the French composer.
Okay.
Who a lot of people know Messiaen in the classical world is like, he's the bird guy. Like, he went around and note transcribed different bird calls and would like build different environments with these bird calls, different pieces.
Wow.
And John Luther Adams did that, but for North American birds. And he kind of did it in a, like, in a, I guess it's not aleatoric, like aleatoric being like this, like here's an aleatoric piece, play this aleatoric
Gotcha.
score.
Okay,
And
I
someone
see.
would interpret like, okay, do I follow the shape of this as like a phrasing thing? What are the colors represent? Like, you can,
But it's all up to the performer.
yeah. And it's like,
Yeah.
pretty much improvised.
Mhm.
It's more arranged than that, but it's not, like, you should start with this and do this. It was like, we populated a warehouse, actually the same warehouse space, and we would like, there was a celeste and a piano, and then there were different winds and strings and percussion, and Vicky Chow, this pianist, arranged how we were all going to perform the arc of this piece. And there's nothing that says like, oh, group birds together, or group, like the bassoons making frog noises, group them together. But she she like kind of painted this like landscape with like certain birds coming in, the frogs kind of existing in one part of the space. The wind was always moving like
Wow.
physically throughout everything, and that was the strings doing like different glisses and stuff. um so Earth Radio, as you know unconventional in terms of like a band it is. It's not even close to like some of the more weird or like I've played pieces with like glass in the piano and like chisels and
yeah,
just like
just random
really
junk that they just threw in there, and they're like, okay, go now,
yeah.
now go. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and not to say that I'm necessarily bored in Earth Radio. It's more like I know how to get weirder.
Right.
So
And you should
I'm
always,
comfortable with a lot of stuff.
maybe that's the key, is that you should always be able to get weirder, right?
Yeah.
However weird that you do get, just leave a little bit of extra space for if you ever wanted to get weirder, and then you can go there if you really want to. That's a nice way to put it. It's like there's this whole spectrum of how weird you can get and how comfortable you can play, right? Or what's the more comfortable style of music that you can play, and then how far do you want to take it? And that's always kind of interesting to me, because I always have been kind of afraid to take the plunge. I've always been very reluctant to be like, I don't know exactly what's going to happen or how or exactly what I'm going for here, but I want to try it out anyways, just to see if I get some kind of interesting product out of it. And that's always been really kind of strange to me, and I've never had practice with it too. So I just like I whenever I write music, I'm always just trying to do like basic song form, catchy hook, interesting progression that, I heard probably somewhere else, and I'm just putting it through here too. But I think that it's good to be able to recognize that, hey, there's a whole mess of things that you can do to make it even weirder and to make it more strange, and to maybe even just like draw upon it a little bit, for your writing.
Yeah. Cause that's, it's funny hearing sometimes with, people I've worked with who are like, oh, I don't know if we could pull. It usually boils down to like, oh, I don't know if we could pull that off. It's like, how would we do that? And I have a million answers. It's like it could be, pre-planned in a backing track thing. It could be, conducted. It could be, like written in as a if it's like a tempo shift or like a sudden key change. Like it could just be something that's written. It could be what knee body does, which I've never really tried that. Knee body has like there's a whole video too of them talking about like they'll be in the heat of some improvisatory thing, and then there'll be a figure that whoever's soloing they'll use as a cue, and then there'll be a motif, some little short melody that pertains to someone in the band, and then that person will start soloing or start doing something. And they could do it with key changes, tempo changes, like they were just playing really fast, and then all of a sudden the trumpet player's like like on a dime.
Wow.
No hesitation.
This is like next level. That's next level stuff there.
Yeah, it's like how, because for them it's like they're so comfortable as a band that it helps keeps things interesting for when they're they're always having to be engaged, because they can't just be like, oh, it's the sax solo, I'll just hang out. It's like, oh, he might cue me to like play in another key. He might
right
like, just to have me like try and harmonize with him on long tones. Like it's like on the fly, like arranging, conducting, improv.
Yeah, you can't afford to get lost in the music when somebody's like, all right, your turn, you should have been paying attention there, because that was your cue.
Yeah, it's so I'm used to, I guess a lot of music school, even outside of performing, is problem solving. So I'm used to getting a piece of music, especially for someone who's a newer composer and doesn't really know how to write for piano. Like they've only ever played clarinet, and now they're writing something that's chordal, and they don't realize like, okay, the human hand doesn't stretch that far, or like I can't do like that many parts with one hand, or
it didn't stop Rachmaninoff.
Yeah. Yeah, I just need to graft his hands onto my hands. And it'll be great.
That's doable. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's been, I even had it the other day at a rehearsal. I was like, oh, this tune will be kind of tricky. And I'm like, nah, it won't. We'll do it. It'll happen. Like you just practice it like every other song that's ever existed. And then the only piece that's ever been like too insane that I don't even like, I think I passed during school just because they were like, we don't know how this is supposed to sound. Was one of what's his name? Stockhausen, one of his Klavierstücks, which is just like a piano etude. But the whole score was just like, it's just one stave. Notes could be like all the way up in the stratosphere or all the way down. And there's no linear phrasing. It was a tone row, but you can't really sing a tone row. I mean, you can, but when you're like knee deep in the piece, you can't be like, oh yeah, it was A flat, G, D flat, the E below that, F sharp, up to the F. Like,
yikes!
I still don't think I played that right because there wasn't any meter. There were one stave, but it used the full range of the piano. So you're reading A's with like 6 ledger lines or something.
What a nightmare! I would tap out. I would tap out real quick.
Yeah, I don't know why. I feel like my professor at the time had me learn it as like, because I never learned any of the conventional, I guess, quote unquote, piano tunes. All the like the Bach everyone plays, or the other than like the Well-Tempered Clavier and the Inventions, but it's like I didn't learn your standard Beethoven, I learned like one Chopin piece, the Ballade in F, and but like the Revolutionary Etude, didn't learn that, or the Clair de Lune, didn't learn that, like
right.
Like all these pieces that all these classical people learned, I didn't learn.
True. Yeah, that's a good point. I had a couple of those. Yeah, I feel like I had like one, I had like one Bach song or one Beethoven, like the Tempest, I think it was. Maybe that's a Mozart one. But then and then Prelude in C sharp minor by Rachmaninoff. And for me, that was like, okay, that feels like enough. I feel like I got my classical in. I learned that, and I should be good from there. And then of course I find myself being like, I should really go back to playing more classical if I really want to get better. Like I'm good at what I've been doing recently, and I enjoy what I've been focusing on. Which was teaching myself jazz piano essentially, and trying to get used to how to recognize, reading through a fake book essentially, which I can do much better now than I could 5 years ago. But then like being like, I should probably go back to classical, and I should probably get good at it. I think Hedinga said that after we went to go see Chris Steele at St. Cecilia, and he came to me after the show, and he's like, yeah, that just makes me want to play more classical after like listening to him play, because of all the stuff that he's putting into, that Thiele is putting into his music. That was all the classical inspired things that he's doing. It's just like, well, yeah, you can use that too in your writing. It's there, it's like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah. It's some of the harmonic movement, or like some of the, I don't know, even just like the technique that you need to play classical.
Sure, just the technique. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just being like, okay, this is what it is. I got to force myself to play it. It might have been easy for whoever. It might have been easy for Chopin, but it's not going to be easy for me, and I got to try to figure it out.
Yeah. There's and then there's like the whole thing that's like, well, music, it's a journey. And you're like, yes, I that is true. It's not like I'm done with music. It's like I'm just keep going.
There's always more to do. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, always more to do. Well, yeah, I think that's a good point to end on. There's always more music to do.
There we go.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks for your time and hanging out on the podcast and all that. It's good to learn some more about what you're doing and what you do and have done.
Totally. No, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on the pod. I think this is an awesome time. It was super easy chatting with you, and I'd love to do it again some other time.
Yeah, for sure. Where, I know it's kind of cliche, but where can people find you on, and the different projects you plan, or if they want to take lessons? I don't know, all the things.
Sure. So probably just look up my Facebook. I don't have like a fancy separate Facebook profile. Just look up Adam Parada. I'm on there. I have an Instagram as well, Adam of the Road, which is my handle for most things if it's not my name. You can book through Melophobix.com. We have some gigs set up this year. We have a store that's online finally, so we have some limited way of being able to sell merch and stuff on there. But if you're very interested in lessons, or you want to contact me, just DM me directly on Facebook or Instagram. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't have too many other projects. I'm playing with Elijah Russ in the Elijah Russ Collective. We'll have a couple of shows going into the summertime as well. And that's pretty much it. That's all I got going on.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. And for those who are, I didn't check to see if anyone's listening now or after the fact, you can support podcasts like these by going to patreon.com/Dutcher Snedeker. You can use that as kind of your one-stop spot to, you can support the podcast. You can get some merch discounts, stickers that get sent out with physical newsletters each month. You can hire me for lessons or recording time. It's like a great hub for which all of my creative things flow.
Yeah, support the pod, support it.
Yeah, go and if you don't want to give money, that's fine. You can like and subscribe and share and all those things that you know how to do already.
Yeah, exactly.
But awesome. Yeah. I don't really have a sign off, but I just kind of let it fade.
So this is where it's happening right now, right?
Yeah, it's just like slowly happening.